In this video, I will be showing you how to create interactive mind maps by using a project named Markmap. What this project lets us to do is this. We simply write our map in Markdown and it creates an HTML output which has zoom, collapse and styling capabilities. Now let's get into it and start understanding how it works. Here we have an example map, but before we dive into the actual map, let's look at these first few lines. This is basically where we set the map behavior, styling and overall settings. So if you look here, it says that the color freeze level is set to 2, which means that after 2 levels, the color will stay the same. And we can observe that on the right hand side. If I were to change that to 3, we should see that every color should change except at the k-text level. Those two should stay the same, and we see that it is exactly the case. Contrarily, if I change it to 1, we should see only one color throughout the map. And there we have it. Now, let me quickly switch back and look into a few more options. Like, as we can see that we can pan and zoom within the map. If I want to limit this behavior for some reason, I don't know, I can easily do that by appending to the settings section. So we just add pan false and zoom false. Now I won't be able to zoom or pan. At this point, I think you got the idea behind the settings section. Obviously, this has more options, and if you want to explore it, you can check out the JSON options part in the documentation. Anyways, now let's reset the settings and delete all of the map besides the initial settings section. Now we are ready to create a map from scratch. So let's start off by adding layers. Like in regular Markdown, we have the pound sign for headings. Therefore, if I add that, it will create a single level. And if I add it once again like so, we got 2 levels in parallel. Now, between levels 1 and 2, if I were to add a subheadings like so, those will create new levels. But here I want to mention a very important thing, which is the limitation of headers. See, we only have 6 levels of heading, which means that we run out after 6 pound symbols. So using them sparingly is a better choice. In this example, we can replace this second layer with the list instead. This will yield in the same result without spanning any headings. We can also repeat this in a nested manner. So what we can do is adding additional layers within the sublayer, like adding level A and level B under the level 1.1 and such. And that is actually a great thing and unlocks many possibilities. And that said, let's make this example a bit more realistic and interesting. So let's try to replicate this React roadmap from roadmap.sh. Well, at least some part of it. So let's add these 3 main pillars and elements of the first 2 pillars. Now at this point, I suggest you to pause the video and try doing it yourself. Once you are done, only then go ahead and check out my implementation. Anyways, let's get started. First, let's add a core node, which is obviously the React roadmap. So we add it like as the main heading. Then we got these 3 main pillars. I can add them as a subheadings because they are worth to be a subheading. Now let's add these subcomponents to each pillar. And since they cannot be considered as headings, I will add them as a list element. So fast forward, we end up with a structure like this. It is almost ready, but we are still missing few parts. For instance, we need to add these basic hooks. Like I've mentioned earlier, we can add them as a nested list. However, this time we can add them as code snippets because, well, they are basically codes. To add an inline code snippet, we use the backticks and inside them we give our code, like so. And as you can see, it changed how it displayed, which is quite neat, but for the use effect, let's try adding language setting on top of it. To do that, we again use backticks, but this time we will use 3 in the beginning and right after those we give our language of choice. Now since this is React, I will be using JavaScript, so I append JS. Next, we simply move on to the next line and add the use effects, and finally on a new line close it with 3 backticks. Once we've done that, we can immediately see that it changed and the syntax coloring is now in place, which is pretty cool. Now let's try something different and add the documentation link to this higher order components. So in roadmap.sh, we select higher order components and copy the official documentation link. Then we head back to our Markdown and change our higher order components to be a link. To do that, we capture this in brackets, then follow that up by parentheses. And between those parentheses, we paste our link. It is as simple as that, and now we have fully functional link. At this point, we can assume that we are happy with the end result and we want to export and use it in somewhere else. Well, we can do that by extracting it as an HTML document or SVG file. All we had to do is download the appropriate one. Depending on where we want to use, the choice can change. However, keep in mind that SVG file can lack some of the features like panning, zooming, and so on. Now, before I finish this video, I briefly want to mention where you can use the Markmap. It is not just limited to its websites. If we head over to the project page, we can see that we can use the dedicated packages within our projects, which can come pretty useful. In addition to that, it also has the VS Code extension, and if you are hardcore, it also has Vim plugin as well. And that's it, this is the Markmap in a nutshell. In my opinion, it's a very useful tool to quickly sketch out maps, which makes solving problems and explaining possible solutions way easier and faster. So in the end, I hope you have enjoyed it and find it helpful. If that is the case, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe. And until next time, take care.